Today we're going to be discussing one of the major themes in Elana's upcoming book. Basically, the targeted individual organized stalking phenomenon in the context of synthetic biology and transhumanism. So I just kind of wanted to start this off with just a real quick kind of overview of the history of organized stalking, which is absolutely or I should say organized stalking and EMF weapons. And actually, when I refer to organized stalking, if I don't also include the phrase and EMF weapons, it's meant to be included in there. So, because organized stalking is kind of synonymous with EMF weapons, because organized stalking doesn't happen outside the context of EMF weapons. I mean, they're intimately interrelated. So I just wanted to kind of start off the conversation with a little bit of history about organized stalking and EMF weapons. That was somewhat inspired by one of Elana's recent talks. I forgot the interviewer, but it just happened a couple weeks ago. But in one of these in this interview, Elana said the 1960s set all this up via COINTELPRO. So for those that don't know, COINTELPRO and MKUltra were the original organized stalking kind of programs that were run by U.S. intelligence agencies and probably some other foreign intelligence agencies who collaborated with them, but mostly U.S. intelligence agencies. So I guess I just wanted to start off by asking Elana to kind of expound a little bit more on that sentiment that she expressed about the 1960s being the 1960s COINTELPRO program being the kind of start of all this and what led us to this surreal state of affairs that we all find ourselves living in here in the 21st century. So
I came of age in the 1960s, and I was always writing about events that were going on, including street riots. I was present at UC Santa Barbara when 3 agents, I subsequently realized, burned the Bank of America to the ground, and then the CIA, FBI dynamic duo blamed 7 student leaders for that, and they were put on trial and they were sent to jail. At that point, I had thought that perhaps I would tell the FBI. I was still pretty naive about the FBI, but in talking to a few people, I realized that I would not tell them what I had seen, because I intuitively knew that it was a covert operation. These guys had big canisters of gasoline or some sort of incendiary that they just poured over it, and I was watching it from the group that was sort of going down the street. We just heard William Kunstler, the lawyer, talking about the Chicago 7 who were on trial at that point. That was Abby Hoffman, Jerry Rubin, etc. So we were, the crowd I was in front of, because I was covering it for the UCSB student newspaper, they were very upset. They were breaking shop windows. At some point they tipped over a police car, and we were in lockdown for 3 months. I was able to leave to go to the store and that sort of thing, but basically we were in lockdown. So that was my first big experience of what came to be called COINTELPRO. COINTELPRO was a program for the FBI, but what a lot of people don't know is that the FBI agents are pretty much, I want to say programmed, but trained by the CIA. So to me, they're the dynamic duo. They go together. It's not a matter of, the FBI is certainly domestic and CIA is international, supposedly. But really at that time, the CIA had begun what's called Operation Chaos. And Operation Chaos was domestic activities of the CIA that very few Americans really knew about. So subsequent to all that, years later, I did 10 years of research on MKUltra, and of course that included the 60s, because I realized from my research that they were actually, they had sort of safe houses, not very safe, that were set up with two-direction mirrors, and they were giving the 60s generation people in the streets bad drugs. They were drugging them with LSD. They were doing a lot of LSD experiments. They were doing a lot of using young people to see what the drugs did. They were doing mind control. They were doing MK Ultra. They were doing remote mind control, which would have been electromagnetic at that point. But it was all sort of the beginning of moving the MK Ultra programming, which has to do with trauma-based mind control, trauma, with hypnosis and drugs. They were moving from those three basic methods to electromagnetic remote control over their minds and their bodies. So those 10 years were well spent, because then I wrote the Sub Rosa America series, which most people don't even know I wrote, because I'm so involved in the geoengineering assault going on now that I haven't had time really to let people know about that. That's a series fiction, but really a history in 4 books of what happened to America since John F. Kennedy's assassination. And so those years spent in studying MK Ultra, I worked with other people who were also engaged in going public with it. We studied what was going on in Montreal at McGill University with Ewan Cameron, a CIA psychiatrist who ran operations on people who simply came to maybe have a bit of a respite in a sort of hospital setting where they could deal with their depression, they could deal with some things that were relatively minor compared to what they fell into with Ewan Cameron, who was under CIA direction, to come up with a technique called psychic driving. And psychic driving is important to the present targeting situation of all the, my guess, and it's a complete guess after reading the books that are available, which aren't that many actually, and being online and being contacted again and again by targeted individuals. My guess is in America alone, there are 1.5 million people being targeted in their homes, their jobs, and on the streets by the remote mind control technology that now seems to have really come of age, but is constantly developing. So I see that my geoengineering studies and the mind control, the remote mind control, I call it EMK, ultra electronic, are very connected. And I want to explain why, and I want to introduce something that even most targeted individuals do not know about. And I am now making a big thrust into the public to let the public know about the nanotechnology aspect of targeting. So here's how it worked for me. I'll just do a little bit of history. Okay, so about 10 years ago, I was living in Santa Fe, New Mexico. I was good friends with Clifford Carnicom, an independent scientist, in fact, the independent scientist, who had been noticing these jet trails in the northern New Mexico beautiful blue skies. And he could tell just from a distance, because he, of course, was trained in chemistry, that the trails were not contrails. They were not condensation trails. They were chemical trails. So he set it up so that he could collect precipitation that would include dew, rain, very little in northern New Mexico, snow, and that he could then analyze that and see what was up with it. He also had a really good HEPA filter on his trailer, and he was collecting detritus from that and analyzing that. So that's basically his shoestring beginning of doing scientific study. Of course, as he began to write papers from what he was finding, he had I think at that time he had a 300 power microscope. He was writing papers, and then he would submit them, like any good citizen would that was concerned, to the CDC, Center for Disease Control, and the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, because these two agencies are, of course, supposed to be taking care of the public health. That began his very steep learning curve very quickly, that they definitely knew he was doing this, because at that time on his computer he could see who visited his site at carnicominstitute.com, I think it was then, whatever it was. And he could see that, yeah, CDC, EPA were there, Department of Defense was visiting, all of the alphabet agencies were visiting his site on a regular level, with absolutely no contact with him. He received nothing from either of the agencies he had sent his papers to, didn't receive any communiques. So slowly he began to realize he was on his own. And that was about when the internet was getting going big time. And I began to work with him when I saw that my red blood cells were being assaulted by some sort of entities, tiny entities that were basically sucking the iron out of my blood cells and turning them into odd shapes. So that was my introduction. Then Adam Parfrey at Farrell House, publishing house, asked if I thought I could write a book on chemtrails. So I did write the first book, Chemtrails, HAARP, and the Full Spectrum Dominance of Planet Earth. At that point, I knew we were breathing this stuff. I knew that. I spent a chapter in that book on Clifford Carnicom's early work. And then I also spent a lot of time on weather in that book, because at that point I was really proving the connections between things like Hurricane Katrina, Sandy, the Fukushima. I was connecting these to the fact that HAARP, the High Frequency Active Auroral Research Project up in Gakona, Alaska, was involved in these things and was being used as a weapon, political weapon, an environmental weapon, and that the weather was being basically shanghaied right in front of us, but no one could possibly believe that. Everyone thought it was extreme weather, global warming, all sorts of terms were bandied about. So that was my beginning. And then from there, yes, I was very interested in the fact that we're breathing all this in. I sort of surmised that GMOs, genetically modified foods, would be involved, because I had remembered that Monsanto began to produce a seed and the fertilizer and protective agents that took into account the presence of aluminum. And I knew that aluminum was the favorite of the military for their chaff that they needed in order to ionize the atmosphere. So, you know, I'm slowly putting things together, in other words. And then when I got involved with the second book, that came out 4 years later, Under an Ionized Sky, From Chemtrails to Space Fence Lockdown, I began to, I'd attracted a lot of people across the world who were sending me information and hearsay and personal experiences. And that's when really the targeted individuals began to write me with their experiences of being targeted. At that point, I knew about nanotechnology. I wrote a chapter about it, chapter 3 in Under an Ionized Sky, but I hadn't read any books on it yet. I'd read mostly things that I had found on the internet. And by the way, contrary to public opinion about the internet, that it's all crazy and you don't know if it's true and all that, there is almost everything I've covered in my 2 books about the military-industrial intelligence complex, all of that is in open source. I mean, I was quite surprised, but given that most Americans don't read anymore, it ended up not surprising me. And the other problem with it is, yeah, it's all out there, but who knows how it fits together? Who knows the context? How to contextualize it? And that's where I come in, because I'm trained in historiography, writing histories with a master's degree. I can contextualize things. I have that kind of head because I'm very interested in just about everything, and I began to look at the nanotechnology more closely, along with the aluminum, barium, strontium, titanium, chromium, lithium in our systems, all from various chemical trails, from jets, from rocket launches. A lot of sounding rockets were going up, putting up satellites, going up to really check into their nanotechnology, their nanosensors that they're still dropping by the trillions in the upper atmosphere. So much of that comes down here, and then we breathe it. And that's when I think what they saw was, oh, okay, so if we drop these things up in the stratosphere, some of them are going to end up in centrifugal force with the Earth turning and end up making this ring around the planet that I also talk about in the second book, which is basically a communication ring of what Lockheed Martin calls the space fence, that we're actually between that ring of communication. It's all magnetic, mostly the magnetic particles on a nano scale of conductive metals for communications. But between that and then all these ground infrastructure units that are constantly going, we're sort of sandwiched between, and the atmosphere being ionized means that it's electrified. I mean, it's a sort of electrostatic would be the way I'd put it, on a mild level. But what I realized with the mind control piece of HARP and the entire space fence instrument is that they use a lot of ELF, extra low frequency radio waves, microwaves, and that was what I was getting complaints about from targeted individuals. Is they were saying that when they would measure sometimes the rays coming in to their homes or workplaces, that they were all of very low frequency. And that actually works better over time if you're going to target people. That would include populations, not just individuals. But if you're going to target people, you want it to be over time. And that's when I realized that a lot of these chemicals that we're breathing in, and a lot of the particulates, the nanoparticulates that we're breathing in, I think they were what the military likes to call dual use. And the dual use would be that they wanted to really experiment on human beings through what they're absorbing through their skin. It goes through the skin, it goes into the lungs, it's in the food, it's in organic food that is grown as carefully as possible, but you're still getting the fallout from the sky. So I at one time thought we were just collateral damage for a military program that was completely dedicated to the secret space program that investment analyst Catherine Austin Fitts addresses a lot, particularly regarding the loss and theft of $21 trillion from the American budget that has yet to be answered for. So the secret space program seemed to me to be connected to transhumanism then, that they were using it to ionize the atmosphere. They needed a lot of wireless operations, but a lot of those wireless operations were probably for targeting populations and individuals as well. And then I began to concentrate on what we have in our bodies. And that's when I encountered the work of Tony Pantalaresco, a Canadian living up in Ontario. He's a herbalist, And he is very busy, has been for 10 years now, studying nanotechnology because he had Morgellons. I began to think of Morgellons as an aspect of nanotechnology. And up to then, I'd been calling it a pathogen. It is truly a delivery system, there's no question. And to my knowledge, Clifford Carnicom is the only one who's taken it apart and seen that it has, I think, 5 basic components in it. The outer one being the fibers that everybody sees on fruits and vegetables, and if you have a little 60 power microscope, you can see those fibers everywhere. I mean everywhere. Or you take an LED flashlight out on a dark night and turn it on, you will see billions, trillions of fibers. And all of those fibers, to my knowledge, are probably loaded with other things that once they get in our bodies and they go into our lungs and then into our bloodstream, then they begin to transmute. And remember, I don't know why I would think you'd know this, but all of them are armed with microprocessors. We're talking computers on a level smaller than a pinprick. So all of them are in communication with what I call the laptop boys, the people who are working for the military industrial intelligence complex and collecting big data, as they like to call it, so that they can understand the human being better. All of these are, a lot of them are sensors. They're delivering lots of chemical and electronic, biological information to their masters who are at a distance, so that they can better plan the transhumanist thrust that they are totally committed to. And that gives you an overview of my journey into this, where now I'm really concentrating on the tiny world, as I call it, the nanotechnology.
Excellent. Wouldn't you say that that Ronald Reagan's SDI Star Wars satellite program was kind of the start of the EMK Ultra, as you term it very astutely, evolution of the original MK Ultra and COINTELPRO programs? I mean, ostensibly, the satellites that Reagan put up in the sky, was done under the guise of,
Missile
fighting
defense,
missile defense, fighting the Cold War, protecting the United States from nuclear attack. Back then that issue was still on the table. Kind of in a way, kind of similar to how the 5G radiation surveillance infrastructure is being put in place under the cover story of faster downloads and somehow progress. When we're already being drowned in too much EMF radiation, and our lives culturally have disintegrated significantly due to the overuse of technology and wireless devices, et cetera, et cetera. But just to contextualize this a little bit more, I think it's important to bring up the Ronald Reagan's launch of the Star Wars satellites in the 80s. Just because I know a lot of people may come to this information, if there's people watching this video for and they haven't heard much about this information, or maybe not anything about this information, might hear terms like nanobots being dropped from the sky and electromagnetic weapons, and these kinds of things might sound like, well, where did this come from? I mean, I thought we were living in democracy in the United States of America. Well, unfortunately, this isn't the case currently by a long shot, and additionally, this was something that's been happening even before 9/11, and all this stuff, happening in a much greater extreme. This was happening in the the early 90s and the 80s and the 70s, the 60s and the 50s. This has been going on a long time. It was just in those decades, it was, the communication channels to disseminate this information were very limited, and we're talking just about videos and maybe a few radio programs and books, you know, and all that stuff was, you know, hard for people to access, and it was expensive. Versus now, where we have, you know, access to the internet, this information is, you know, and has been for the last 15 years, been disseminated in a radically expanded way.
Well, the SDI.
Yes.
Yes, definitely the targeting was certainly part of the grand vision of what SDI would serve.
Yeah.
No question. SDI, and I'm glad you brought it up, Strategic Defense Initiative under the Reagan Troika, I call it. That would be Reagan, George H.W. Bush, and Secretary of Defense Dick Cheney. They tabled that program, and it sort of melted into Bill Clinton, who came on next. And we now know enough from the deep state that Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton were both always involved in the George H.W. Bush cabal, or whatever you want to call it, alliance. They tabled it. It went to Bill Clinton. He renamed it the Ballistic Missile Defense Program. It still went, it was tabled, but what that really means is it went black. And it went black, in my opinion, because the atmosphere was not right for full spectrum dominance, which would include the targeting of populations and individuals. See, you can't really run radio waves, microwaves into and through a vacuum. You've got to have a lot of particulate matter in order to electrify enough of the sky so that you can run multiple operations. And that's what they needed for the SDI program. They didn't have it. So they worked on it. They had all the Tesla science that, you know, certainly HAARP was straight out of Tesla, and the other ionosphere keeters, they were concentrating on making the other ionosphere keeters smaller and more mobile, and there was very busy. But and eventually they had great success with HAARP and the ionosphere, and so they were able to bring down a lot of ions, which is electrons, down into our atmosphere to turn it into an electrolytic atmosphere so that they could run these operations. And then here came the SDI back. They don't talk about it directly, that this is the SDI on steroids, but they do now and then mention that that they're able now to really do the Strategic Defense Initiative. So yes, you're absolutely right. This is it. The geoengineering is it. And what I haven't gotten to yet, because I wanted to take a little pause and let you say something, is that I haven't told you yet what those little nanobots inside your body, waiting for their master's voice, I might say, have to do with targeting. They have everything to do with targeting because they are in various parts of our body. For example, certainly I remember a targeted individual telling me, in fact, he was a very good journalist at one time, but he was brutally targeted, I won't mention his name, and he told me that they had pumped up his muscles in his body so that he looked like Charles Atlas, and he was sorry when they took it away because he liked being buff, but that ability to do that, how would you do it? Can you? It's a good question. Can you control the muscles with just rays of electromagnetism? Well, I don't think so. I think you really need these nanobots. I think the nanobots are crucial to total control over a person. Now, many of them are in our brain. So voice to skull, V2K control, are they communicating with the nanobots? Well, I have a feeling that they are, because the nanotechnology really got going in about 1990. That's the story. Did the military know about it before then? Oh, yes. Yes, they absolutely knew. And they absolutely wanted it, because not only do nanobots build matter from atoms. I mean, I'm serious. That many of the nanobots are 3 to 50 atoms wide, and they produce these little cubes. And then you could build an entire house out of nanobots. All you would need would be the assemblers, and the assemblers is kind of what stopped it for quite a while, was how you could make these nanobot assemblers that would be remotely programmed and controlled to build out whatever they were told to build out. And that, I think, now is a done deal. And so in the next book, the one on synthetic biology, I go deeply into the nano technology, and we're now moving into a nano age, and it's very concerning, because nanobots operate as a swarm, and they have a swarm consciousness. And what that means is it's a collective consciousness. No one need be concerned about 1 or 2 little nanobots, but when they work with 1 million or 1 trillion others and move as one, you're looking at like the locusts that recently assaulted in Africa. I believe it was in Africa, and really wrecked their harvest and planting. This is a huge concern, because the nanobots could actually eat the world. I mean, am I serious? Well, I read a book about the founder of it, Eric Drexler. He was very clear at the beginning in the 70s when he was working on this. He was concerned himself. In fact, he tabled working on it for over a decade, because he thought that this was a technology that really should not come of age. But eventually, he was won over with the dream, a very liberal dream, I might add, of how the world could be a wonderful place with all of us having plenty of leisure. We don't have to go to jobs anymore. We just get the nanos to build everything and do everything for us. And so with this pipe dream, he went ahead, and by then he had attracted attention. At first, a lot of scientists thought he was joking. It just can't happen. On an atomic level, you're going to build matter. Yes, and now I'm telling you, it's everywhere. And a lot of people are eating it in their foods. They're wearing it in their clothes. This is a technology that's come of age. But the main thing for targeted individuals is and I think I was initially alerted to this by a targeted individual in Portland who used to send me plenty of footage. He was able, with an infrared light, to capture various little tiny nano somethings when he was being assaulted. And I looked over those again and again and again, and understood that, that he was being triggered. The nanos were being triggered in him, and then the targeting would happen. And the reason I say that is I had an experience of an outbreak of Morgellons in my body when I had planned to go and visit Clifford Carnicom, and we were going to spend a week with a microscope. I have a undergraduate biology background, so we were going to spend a week in his lab with the microscope and look through a lot of the specimens that many people have been sending him, and we were going to go over things and see what he could use and what he couldn't. And instead, a week and a half before I left, I got a full outbreak on the calves of my legs, and very itchy. When I would open up one of the pores that was pouring out something, I looked at it under a microscope and saw that it was basically a crystal, and I had lots and lots of crystals coming out. So what I realized in that, because when I came back from that trip after Clifford and I had spent time scraping my legs and looking at specimens of my legs, is about 3 weeks after I got back, cleared up overnight. And was I doing anything different? No. No, I was eating the way I always do, living the way I do. And that's when I decided that many of these nanobots can be triggered, including the Morgellons outbreak that many people have and many people don't have. It makes people think that the ones who have the outbreaks and the lesions with the little wires coming out of them, which often comes with targeting, and I assume you know that, most Morgellons survivors, thrivers of these outbreaks, where they have to do weeks and weeks and weeks of intensive dietary changes and baths and all sorts of things that Tony Pantalaresco recommended to them, or they found on their own because they're all experimenting. The truth is that most of them were targeted during that time, either before or during or after or all three. So there is a connection between the nanotechnology and targeting. I'm absolutely certain. Now, is it possible that you could target someone without utilizing their nano bots in their bodies? I don't know, but my tendency now is to think, no, it's not possible, because the targeting has amped up so much in the last 10, 15 years.
Mm-hmm.
It used to be relatively rare. Now it's everywhere, and it can happen any moment, any time, anywhere. And the other thing is, I've noticed that most of the targetings, yes, they are for a lifetime, and these are long studies. This is not just they're making money off of giving people pain, or they're all sadists. No, this is really about long-term studies going on, and I can't remember who I was reading. There are very few books that you can read on this that are really very good, and I'm sure that you might know a couple that I don't. But I've read a lot of articles, and I am contacted by a lot of people in Europe who are being targeted, because Rauni Kilde was a great hero in Europe, and she was a hero of mine too. She was the Finnish physician of the entire country of Finland, and Rauni began to tell the truth, and she was killed for it. So I'm contacted by a lot of Europeans because they, for some reason, think I'm Rauni Kilde too, which I'm not.
No, I kind of think of you like that, actually.
Okay, because I'm an older woman, and I'm I'm out front here trying to get some attention to some very serious things that I feel not just we are going to suffer from, but our children and grandchildren. So I tend to think that the nanotechnology goes hand in hand with the targeting that is going on. And the question is, what is it that drew you, someone to, if you are a targeted individual, what drew someone to you to begin to put you on the map for targeting and triggering of Morgellons outbreaks, of targeted events? That I can't answer. I assume there are many agendas, some of them genetic, some of them criminal, of getting even, and and I think an entire criminal economy has been born out of this now. And so the government certainly is involved. But one thing I think is true: the government, and that would be the military, in my mind, or the CIA intelligence apparatus, that they own the patents and they own the rights to these devices that can be used for many types of targeting, and that includes satellites. And cell towers and all the usuals. And that if indeed they lease out or reward a criminal enterprise with one of these devices, the condition is that they must collect data and they must submit the data. They can't just go randomly going around messing with people's lives. They have to collect the data, because I think that is the primary brunt of what is now known as big data, and it's devoted to a purview of everything that has to do with being human for the sake of building a cyborg model, a transhumanist population of slaves, basically, all pretty much mind controlled without knowing it anymore, sort of like in the film 1984, where you see one of the people that's controlled talking to the main character. Yes, I feel wonderful. I just feel wonderful. And that idea that we could be conditioned from afar, this is something that every single person needs to really look at. It is not a matter of some people have more guns and many don't, or that some people are being targeted and most aren't, because this infers that the targeting will be total. It'll be total. And it'll be to varying degrees, yes, depending upon the experiments or the powers that you are being subjected to. But right now, I would say that everyone needs to take a really close look at, for example, your cell phone. I don't own one. Why would I? Why would I want to own a government weapon? Those can be used to pulse frequencies to you, and your nanobots in your body and brain are completely simpatico with those frequencies that their master has given them access to. And they can change your thoughts, your feelings, your health. I mean, on a scale of tragedies, do I need to say this makes the Nazis look like kindergarten? This is, am I saying it's tomorrow and in 20 years? No, I'm saying it's here. It is here. And yes, they can make it even better and more awful, but it is definitely happening now. And these are all the conclusions I've come to inductively. I have not gotten any of this from any textbooks or books by others. I have simply read and read and read and thought and thought and thought to understand what this nanotechnology is actually doing.
Could I just interject a little bit about the genesis of organized stalking, just to contextualize this a little bit more for people. So, again, so people kind of have an understanding of how this happened, because a lot of people come to this information for the first time and they're just like kind of baffled that this could actually be happening and don't understand how this could just have these circumstances could have just landed on us like this. Well, they haven't, but this wasn't something that just landed, in the 21st century. As we talked about, the MK Ultra program and the COINTELPRO program were the origins of this. The strategic defense Star Wars satellites that Reagan put up in the 1980s were the kind of continuation of it in a highly advanced electromagnetic form. And then also another thing to understand and keep in mind is that at the end of the Cold War in the late 1980s, it was 89 when the Berlin Wall fell, which was only, I think, maybe about 6 years, after the Star Wars SDI Reagan satellites were put up in orbit. At that point, when the Cold War ended, the East German Setzerzung state, which the East German Setzerzung state was like an all-out oppressive organized stalking state in East Germany at that time. So the East German state collapsed and merged with West Germany and all became democratic. The Setzerzung state was nullified, and then it was made global. So at that point, organized stalking at that point in the history of organized stalking, the genesis of organized stalking, it dramatically expanded in scale and scope in the 1990s. And that was absolutely reflected in the number of reporting subjects of organized stalking that were starting to report it. And probably the most, probably the best example of that was Julianne McKinney's electronic surveillance project document that she created with the Association of National Security Alumni. So basically what was happening were a lot of national security personnel were reporting being stalked, being subject to organized stalking and EMF weapons in an unprecedented manner. It happened in the 80s and in the past, but this Julianne McKinney and her organization noticed that, well, all of a sudden this is happening, like, way more than than she had ever seen before. So that's something that's important to realize. And then, of course, that continued throughout the 1990s, and then after 9/11, when if people have studied that, it's the most obvious and most ridiculous, official cover story that has ever been floated. It's just, those buildings didn't come down because of terrorists. Those buildings were brought down by controlled demolition. If you haven't seen the architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth documentary, go and watch it. It takes about an hour to 2 hours to come to that realization, incontrovertibly. But when that event happened, and the whole war on terrorist hysteria and surveillance state was put in place, that was yet again another cover story, like the cover story for the Reagan satellites in the 80s. This was another cover story, but even more massive. So and then and then the post 9/11 surveillance state in the early 2000s was expanded even greater by the proliferation of EMF technologies, and most likely probably the expansion of chemtrails in the sky to kind of
to deliver them,
to deliver the particulates that they deliver to expand the targeting program. So then basically by the late 2000s and the early 2010s, again, I would say at that point, just via the momentum of the surveillance state and the proliferation and expansion of chemtrails and the proliferation and expansion of EMF technologies, at that point 4G was put into place, which was very significantly higher than 2G and 3G, which in short-term exposures actually aren't that harmful. They're more harmful in long-term exposures. 4G was like the kind of wireless, radiation infrastructure that was put in place. That I think that was the first time where the wireless radiation that people were exposed to were actually starting to become dangerous, even in short-term exposures. And this, of course, radically fueled the expansion of organized stalking. And then I would say, right around the Snowden disclosures, and in part fueled by the Snowden disclosures, it seems like the organized stalking, situation has achieved, from basically 2013 till now, it seems like it's achieved a certain kind of a new kind of awareness in the public zeitgeist, so to speak. I think that kind of brings us up to where we're at now, and a lot of the technologies that Elana is talking about. So I just wanted to kind of bring up, the holistic dystopia that we're facing right now, and the fact that, to echo what Elana was just saying at the end of her last monologue, was, we're really at the point where we're seeing this, and this should be really clear to people who, spend, even just a couple days studying this. You don't have to study this for very long to see the truth of what she began to say, and I'm going to continue to say right now. But we really see, now that we're seeing, net neutrality being gutted, net neutrality has been gutted, and now we're seeing it being cemented. I mean, there's definitely an effort to stop that, and that's a real critical issue. But it is somewhat being cemented in place. Hopefully we can stop that. But this is what's occurring. We see 5G. Again, it's kind of a similar situation with the net neutrality. We see it. There's significant pushback on it, but we see it starting to be kind of rolled out in an omnipresent manner. There's definitely a lot of hope on that front, but we do see a lot of movement on, the evil side of the coin too here. Vaccines, again, very similar to net neutrality and 5G. We see it being, rolled out, in new laws, especially here in California. I don't remember the exact law, but there was a new law recently passed in California to mandate, children, and I believe even adults too, mandatory vaccinations, which have been proven in the last 20 years to be incredibly toxic and have a lot of the same chemicals and compounds that Elana talks about in the chemtrails. And then of course we have the chemtrail situation, which Elana has prolifically talked about. And then also I'd like to bring up that Facebook and Google have announced that they plan to connect every computer user's brain to the internet. So in the future, this isn't 15, 25, 50, 70, 100 years from now, they've publicly announced this. So this is beyond even a well-founded assertion backed up by hard documents. So there's that too, but there's also public announcement that Facebook and Google have made publicly that they plan, in the next 5 to 10 years to hook up the entire public's brains to a wireless brain-to-computer interface. So your cell phone will not be something you carry in your pocket anymore. It'll be something that's broadcast into your mind. And again, this isn't science fiction. This is something that's happening 50, 100 years from now. This is something that has been publicly announced by Facebook and Google that they want to roll out in the next 5 to 10 years. So I just wanted to kind of, give that context to what Elana is saying, and just ask Elana, what her thoughts are on, how we're seeing this being rolled out on everyone in the future. So, in the near future too. So when people see and hear of targeted individuals being subject to organized stalking and EMF weapons, this isn't something now that's rare. This is, pre, 1990, it was extremely rare. Post 1990, it was somewhat rare. Post 9/11, it's become, fairly common. And, so we're seeing the steady progression of this phenomenon expand, more and more and more. And, now we're at the brink of, net neutrality being gutted, this radical radiation surveillance grid, 5G being implemented, toxic vaccines being enforced by laws, mandated, no exceptions at all. We're seeing chemtrails being dispersed in a radical manner in our skies, pretty much on a daily basis. We're hearing from the largest technology companies, Facebook and Google, that they want to connect everybody's brain to the internet, so your smartphone is no longer something that you carry in your pocket, but it's something that you broadcast in your mind, apparently, as well as your computer too. So these are things that people really need to come to understand and really get engaged in doing everything they can to fight, because this isn't just a problem of certain aspects or certain segments of the population. This is everybody's problem, and it really couldn't be any more clear now than it is.
I agree.
Mm-hmm.
And we're in a time of transition. A lot of people are afraid. I understand that. Every period of transition in history certainly brings with it anxiety that it's not going to be the world you thought it was anymore. But I myself, yes, I've gone through, I've been targeted a few times. But so far, I am allowed, this is how I look at it, I am allowed to continue educating the public about the advent of this time, that we're leaving one time and we're entering another, a very brave new world. And there were two things that you said that I would like to comment on specifically. I just want to check our time. Are we okay?
We're okay.
Number one, I think controlled demolition in the 9/11 towers was definitely in place, just like it always is. It was in Hurricane Katrina too. Those canals that they wanted to get the poor out of, the 36,000 or however many poor households there were, they wanted them out. So they had controlled demolitions. If it turned out that the hurricane did not take them down the right canals, they could then use the controlled demolition. Same thing in the 9/11 towers. What tells us that it was more than controlled demolition is the dust. The dustification, I think Judy Wood calls it in her very great book, Where Did the Towers Go? Everyone should own a copy of that book, even though it's very badly bound, I might add. Yes, the dust that the firemen commented on over and over and over, that they were wading through a magnetic dust, and that is what nanotechnology can do to matter. That is an entire several towers and I guess 3,000 bodies can be dustified like that. So that people need to really look at that, because they're pushing very hard now for history to say it was controlled demolition. It was more than that. It was nanotechnology in action. And the other thing I would say is, yes, you're right. It's just beginning now. The turning our environment into a virtual world, into what Ray Kurzweil talks about, the singularity world that he would like to see, where you can be running your internet in front of your eyes. You're in the cloud knows you and can give you the data that you're thinking about. How can all this be done? Again, I have to say that it's the nanotechnology that will avail them of the ability to have the sensors that, already I've had people say to me that they suddenly get an ad on their monitor of something that they were just thinking about. They hadn't mentioned it to anyone. So I think we're there, but it's just the beginning of getting rid of the cell phones and the computers and having the whole virtual reality of life, where the question you'll ask yourself is this really there, or is this virtual? And that is exactly the direction we're going in, and exactly what the transhumanists want. They want us in that virtual reality where we can be manipulated without knowing we're being manipulated. They can have fun and jollies remotely. I know there's already Hollywood clubs of people who actually pay to watch targeted individuals suffer. So, everything's about making a buck in America, right? So this is already underway. Do I know how to stop it? No, I don't. I don't think we can stop it now. I've been shouting and trying to get people to think since the 60s, and I was unable to do that. And now it's too late for a move in a different direction. Maybe it always was too late, I don't know. But I know there are ways that you can strengthen yourself. And certainly one topic with a targeted individual that I have broached with a couple of targeted individuals that I know of. One, his mother flew out to talk with me for a weekend to see what role she could play in strengthening him. Yes, nutrition, keeping your physical health, not buying into what the V2K voice is guiding you to do or say or think, whatever. But also it has to do with understanding the role of nanotechnology and taking authority over it. These are entities that are very tiny, and they have a swarm consciousness of their own. It's theirs. They don't think like us. They are, I mean, everyone I've read in the nanotech world says that they are right at the edge of the quantum realms, which means the tiny, tiny, tiny realm, and there are smaller things than a nano. A nano is 1/1000th of a meter. A peta, which is the next down, I don't know what that is, a trillionth of a meter. I don't know what it is. But we're entering a period in which the tiny atomic world now, at the very edge of the quantum dimensions that I understand that most scientists at least know of, 12 dimensions, 14 dimensions, whatever it is, and whatever that means. We are living in a transition period from Newtonian, Einsteinian science to a very, very different science that has been kept under wraps for many years and is now being brought out, and many experiments are going on right in front of our faces, but we don't recognize it because we're kind of afraid of it. I attempt to embrace this era as a time when I can develop my consciousness and I can learn so much of this transition that perhaps it'll be useful to others or to myself in the future. So I really recommend to people to not so much resistance, but not embracing and say, gee, thanks for this great opportunity to learn as you torture me. I don't mean that. I mean to take whatever is there in life and learn about it. And really, scientia est potentia, knowledge is power. And I've said that way too much, but I live by that. And I must say that I have, even despite having been targeted a few times, I very much feel very strong and very connected to the human drama, where I don't want people to be slaves. I want them to still be able to develop their free will. Even if they choose not to develop their free will, I want them to have the choice. So that's why I fight so hard.
And one other thing I want to bring up, just real briefly, because we don't have a ton of time, and this is more of an overview document, or an overview video, and we could go into any one of these kind of technologies for probably 3 or 4 hours, just each one of them. But it definitely needs to be mentioned. When you talk about these nanobots thinking on their own, are you actually referring to each individual nanobot being programmed to think on its own, or are you talking more about artificial intelligence? Because I know artificial intelligence is definitely that's a key component. I forgot, that's one of the things I forgot to mention, and when I was talking about the kind of litany of dystopian developments that are kind of asymmetrically kind of being imposed on the entire population at large. Artificial intelligence is actually kind of that was a huge one to miss, because artificial intelligence is kind of the it sure seems to me it's like that's the kind of the overarching kind of brain that's going to be running this thing.
Well, but we've been talking about artificial intelligence the whole time. I've been talking about nanotech.
Okay, that's what I meant.
And I'll tell you a scene where you can see it in action. And I have this. I don't know that I'll bring it out tonight, but at one of the talks I will definitely show a video of it. When I saw the nanotechnology swarming in the California fires, I saw it in the Santa Rosa fire in 2017, I think it was. And what I saw was, and I hadn't thought it out yet, and then I heard a wonderful video put out by Jamie Lee. Interviewing an electronics guy who'd been in the industry and was explaining what we were seeing in that video, which was from a drone. What I saw was the embers of the fire moving in a strange pattern, and I was like, wow, that can't be wind that's blowing them. What is that? And I was watching them as they sort of did an S-curve approach to yet another area that was to be burned. And then Jamie Lee, in his video study of all this, I think he did 100 videos of the fires. In one of them, in number 51, I think it's called, number 51, he showed how the swarm worked as an AI, as in something was definitely directing it. Now, was it a human operator or was it an AI system? However you look at it, the life, the consciousness of the nanotech is very much AI. And that's why I said, very important, that this tiny world is on the very cusp of quantum dimensions. And as Richard Feynman once said, if you aren't deeply disturbed by quantum physics, you obviously haven't understood it yet. And that's how I feel about this. Is I saw those nanos swarming and moving through that fire and setting this one on fire and setting that one on fire. That is the consciousness in the nanos. And that's what they are. They're in our bodies. It's very concerning to me. And that's what Tony Pantalaresco is trying to alert the world to. There are ways to constantly discharge them and get them out of our bodies and out of our brains. But we have to change our lifestyle. It's no longer even viral biology of the coronavirus. That was a 5G city. I'm sorry, but those nanos were stimulated by that 5G in that city. With this, they had the signature. They were programmed with the signature. This is my own thought. Programmed with the signature of the novel coronavirus, and they just go. They just go. That is AI. That is AI. That's the AI world we're going to be living in because of the nanotechnology. It's not that cool one where, oh, we're going to be enhanced and we're going to be more enlightened and have greater brain power and all the Kool-Aid that so many generations are drinking. Are you kidding me? I mean, this is, what we need is to learn to think and really look deeply into these two things, artificial intelligence and nanotech.
And, again, like similar to, the brain-computer interface, stuff. And this might sound like science fiction to people, but the cold hard reality is this, again, like the brain-computer interface is being publicly announced. Artificial intelligence has been publicly announced, and beyond just like, these Sophia artificial intelligent robots that they put out there to make it all seem like warm and fuzzy, good times you're gonna have with your artificial intelligent robot Sophia friend. When you start looking at the deeper, public disclosures, even on mainstream even channels too. This isn't even a public disclosure on our alternative media channel. Not that the alternative media should be thought lesser of. It should be, really the alternative media is the real media. But every once in a while you get something on the mainstream media that's actually true. Elon Musk has come out many times on many, mainstream media channels talking in detail how, humanity needs to merge our brains with artificial intelligence, just to keep up, and he's also in quite a lot of detail explained how artificial intelligence is like worse than all out atomic war on Earth. I mean, he's literally described it like that. And I've heard, I don't remember the exact name of the person, but I heard an artificial intelligence kind of, I guess he was an entrepreneur or something. He was in the leadership of some kind of artificial intelligence development company. And this person, he phrased it this way. He phrased it that when artificial intelligence fully kind of is implemented in our society, it's going to be like an alien race, a hostile alien race.
To an alien god. That's Geordie Rose.
Yeah, he described it similar to that. He described it like this is going to be like, an alien race landing on Earth, taking over, that views humanity similarly as we view like ants on the ground. Just like, like nothing. So there's, you know, that this isn't, you know, speculation. This isn't, unfounded theories being thrown around here. This is stuff that's, you know, at this point has been, you know, publicly announced by the powers that shouldn't be. And people really need to kind of inform themselves and really empower themselves with the truth of this information. And do everything possible to see to it that this end does not come to pass. So I think that's a good place to stop this.
Yes.
I think we're about at our time limit. So I thank Elana Freeland so much for spending this time with me and being so generous with her time. And I thank her so much for her efforts in getting the word out to as many people as possible about these really unfortunate realities that we're all really, we all really need to kind of pay attention to and step up to the plate and do something about. So I just encourage everyone that's watching this in the Los Angeles area to come out to Elana's talk at the Peace Center in West Los Angeles this coming Saturday the 15th. 6 p.m. You can find out more information about that at losangelesskywatch.org. And then also Elana's going to be speaking up in Northern California at some kind of expo.
At the Subud Center. Well, the liveaware.com, LiveAware conference. And Matt Landman is the keynote speaker.
Okay, excellent. Thanks so much to everybody for watching this, and you have a good evening or day from wherever you're watching from. Thank you very much.
Thank you.